topic. So Sony's first party game pipeline. So it was an interview, and Sony's had a pretty rough, month or so. A lot of announcements that didn't land well with gamers, and then obviously a lot of positive announcements from Xbox. And, it did seem like they needed to get on the front foot, especially with IPs, because, games have always where Sony's actually dominated. So you actually had the head of PlayStation Studios, Herman Hulst, who has been elevated from the regular studios to head up PlayStation Studios. And, in this article in Wired, it's quite interesting. He actually called out there's 25 first party titles.
That's
and
a lot.
First party for Sony is a bit weird because I think some people would actually classify some of these games as second party. But do you know what I mean, Swinny? Because like there's some of the games like that Nintendo definitely calls second party. It's not a Nintendo game, but they publish it. But anyway, I'll park that. But 25 first party games, and then half of them being new IPs as well. So I think, Swinny, you wanted to do some speculation on what the games could be.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things here. So first of all, we've got our known titles and a couple of rumored ones. So it's about thinking about what first-party titles of known IPs do we think they have in development, or let's say next 3 years that they could be planning on getting out there, and maybe some gaps in the kind of, I guess, their offerings that they may be working on, which is the new IP side of things. So I guess let's clarify what we know is out there, and if I've missed one, feel free to let me know. But from a first-party standpoint, from what I could find, we've got Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which is about to come out, but that would probably be counted as part of those 25. We've got Horizon Forbidden West, we've got Gran Turismo 7, and we've got the God of War sequel, which is generally at this moment subtitled like Ragnarok. And the rumored titles, and there's maybe more here that we've heard from reports that are in development, but we have no idea how far away. One is The Last of Us remake. Another is a new IP from Sony Bend, the Days Gone studio. Was there any others that you guys remember that may be rumored?
No, actually. And it's kind of a funny one.
But I want to start some rumors.
It's a funny one because, I think this is why they've come forward and put some stuff out there because, there isn't a lot necessarily on the horizon that you know about. I actually went through all their studios and said, okay, this is what I think they're making.
Huh? Okay.
Cool.
So, do you want me to reel through it, or what do you want to do?
No, you go. Run through it.
All right.
You've done the most research.
I'll do it quick. But this, like when I do the maths, this is more than half. So I think it works out to be like 16 or 17 or something like that. So we know it's wrong because they said half of them are new IP, right? Okay, so London studio, so they do SingStar. I think they could do a PSVR 2 SingStar game. There was some patents that Sony had where it had interaction with people on the couch with those who are in the virtual world in VR. So I think that makes sense and would be funny with SingStar. That's a good party game. Asobi team, so that's formerly kind of like Japan Studio. Asobi was in Japan Studio, but they're kind of Japan Studio now. I think they'll be doing like a fully fledged Astrobot VR game for PSVR 2. That's a perfect fit. Astrobot's got a lot more like knowledge ability with people on PlayStation now. And I could imagine they'll do like a massive, like really, really deep, long game in that space. Insomniac, we kind of already know they're working on Spider-Man 2. That's pretty clear. They've demonstrated that they're able to, work on multiple IPs at the same time. So I think they might reboot Resistance and do like a follow-up in Resistance. I think Insomniac is probably almost the, most likely team to actually do a new IP. So I'd probably put a question on that one. Guerrilla, we already know Horizon Forbidden West. Polyphony, that's Gran Turismo 7. Naughty Dog, I mean, there's lots of rumors around a new Uncharted game, a new Last of Us game, Media Molecule. So they've done Dreams. Dreams was pretty big flop, but it's got a quite interesting architecture. So I do wonder if they'll try to reboot Dreams on PC and PS5 and then include PS4. I think you need to get it on PC, to be honest.
Surely the idea is do they support that Dreams with new updates or anything? Do we know if they actually...
They are, yeah. They're still supporting it. Yeah.
But that's what I'm wondering, are they continuing to support that rather than work on a brand new IP?
Oh, I just wonder if it's a bit like, I guess, sorry, I didn't frame it right because I'm trying to rush through it, but I wonder if it's like a No Man's Sky where it's still No Man's
Mm.
Sky, but is it really? It's kind of No Man's Sky 2, let's be
They
real.
updated quite a lot.
But
yeah.
it's still the same title. So my argument would be it's still Dreams, but they're really going to do something different with it. So they'll use the bones of it. And then I think, if they're smart, launch it on PC. I don't think there's any downside to do that. And maybe if you do something smart with like launch it on PC, but you can publish games in a little pocket of the store on PS5 only. So get a carrot back into the PS5 and PS infrastructure and ecosystem. PlayStation Malaysia, I actually went through some of the stuff they did. And, they're one of those studios a bit like Ubisoft Singapore, where they're probably ready to do a new game. I wonder if they'll do Twisted Metal. I feel like Twisted Metal, given that there's a movie that's in production, makes sense that a game would be in production. Sumo Digital, maybe going back to their roots, Little Big Planet 4. That's a huge franchise that kind of needs to be revitalized a bit. Housemarque, wouldn't be shocked if they did something like Returnal 2. Seems like it doesn't make any sense given what the game is, but Sony does love sequels. Sucker Punch, I can't see how they're not going to do like Ghost of Tsushima 2. Like that game was so massive and hit so hard. They're another studio that could actually do multiple IPs potentially. So, they're the ones who, ran through Infamous. So, is that Infamous 3 maybe potentially? Santa Monica, we already know.
Too,
God of War 2. Santa Monica, I mean, it's the studio that should be able to make multiple IPs, but they don't seem to be doing that recently. So I've just left it as God of War 2. I do wonder, now this is like going into the, crazy territory. Like I feel like Bloodborne 2 is kind of inevitable. I don't know how that gets made.
I had that on my list as well.
Don't think Miyazaki is going to be involved in it. But I think they'll do Bloodborne 2, and then at the same time, maybe it'll be if you get Bloodborne 2, you can get a 60 FPS version of Bloodborne with it. Like Sony is a bit of a dick with those kind of things, so I could totally see that happening, and that's something that people desperately want. And then like the other studio, San Diego studio, they've been doing the show. Supposedly they're doing another IP, so that could be a new IP. Ben Studio, we already kind of know they're doing a new IP, but it does make you wonder about Siphon Filter, when that's going to come back. Quantic Dream, they always do weird games.
I was about to ask, what's David Cage up to?
But at this point, like, we're outside of the first-party space. When
They classify these as first-party games, though, Swinny. That's why I'm saying it's weird. They do. They actually call these games
parties.
Well, I've always known them as traditionally second-party games, but I was going through their list and some of what they're saying as PlayStation Studio games, and to me, they're second-party games, but they call them PlayStation Studio games. So I don't know how you want to classify that, Swinny.
Look, I mean, we have to kind of, if we're
like, is Concrete Genie a first-party game or a second-party game?
So if we're talking about the words of the head of PlayStation Studios, then we need to play in whatever words they use.
Yes. So, like, the best example is Pixelopus, which is Concrete Genie. That is not owned by PlayStation Studios, right? But they call Concrete Genie a PlayStation Studios game, like effectively a first-party game. So it's kind of weird to me. It's like a contract, and it's an exclusive game to PlayStation. But yeah, normally that'd be a second-party game, but the
Quantic Dream to me is different because they release stuff on PC as well, outside of the Sony space.
Sure. But I mean, like a lot of these games are going to PC now as well, right? Like Horizon and stuff like that. So,
but they're published by Sony, like whereas Quantic Dream, like those games aren't published by Sony on Steam. And
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting because then a counterpoint to what I'm saying myself, with I forgot the name of it, the Hideo Kojima game.
Death Stranding.
That definitely wasn't called a first-party game, but it was funded by Sony and published by Sony as well, like on PlayStation, not on PC. So I don't know. They seem really weird with the titles. It's just Concrete Genie. They definitely call that a first-party game, and it's not, according to the definition. So yeah, that's my sort of run-through of like looking through.
I think you've probably covered everything.
Pretty good run-through, yeah.
Think of. I mean, you covered the stuff I had mentioned as the easy wins, like your Ghost of Tsushima sequel, your Astro VR sequel, and stuff like that. Yeah, I wonder. Do you think that Sony has obviously a lot of great support from third parties in a lot of this space, but when I look at their offerings, there's definitely to me gaps. Like they generally don't have a big RPG franchise, right?
Well they have Final Fantasy, right?
No, I was about to say like they're very empowered by a lot of third party.
Oh, you mean first party? Sorry, man.
Yes, first party. So they're empowered by a lot of third parties in that space. But to me, it is a big gap, and I wonder at some point if they've had a very good relationship or very good support by Level 5 in the past, like Nino Kuni and a lot of their games as well. I wonder at some point if they will, potentially like do like a the situation like you did with Housemarque and stuff like that, but maybe a Level 5 RPG in that space. Because to me, they're kind of lacking from a first party perspective on that. But also the fact, and this could be a red herring, but the fact that they've now purchased Evo, and obviously they've got great fighting game support from third parties. But I wonder, I don't know if they'll make a push like they did for Street Fighter 5, for Street Fighter 6 again, but do you think that at some point it makes sense to have another first party fighting game in their arsenal?
So my perspective on Sony, it's very different to Microsoft. Sony, number one, doesn't have a massive amount of capital as a company, right? Like they used to have lots of different components to their business firing, but PlayStation now is the bulk of their profitability. And I just look at it and I go, they've already got really great relationships. There are you have to acknowledge that there are just cultural things about Japan business. Like the fact that, they always have better deals with Square and Capcom and all these Japanese publishers and studios that Microsoft has never been able to break through fully. And there is a cultural dimension to that. And business in Japan is different than in the West, where it's like the only thing that matters is the dollar. It's not really like that in Japan completely. I think they just look at it and go, we don't need to have, first party support in RPGs, fighting games, because we get the support from these studios and we pay for it as well. I mean, don't forget, we know that they paid for exclusivity with, Final Fantasy, with, Resident Evil 7 VR, so it can't go on any other platform, lots of those kind of games. Yeah. And I think they'll just keep doing those practices, to be honest. I mean, they were already in deep chats. I mean, this is more of a rumor, but, in deep chats with Bethesda around Starfield and, talking about large sums of money to make it an exclusive, RPG on PlayStation. So I think they're very conscious of the gaps that they have, but I think the way they fill those gaps isn't, hey, we need to make the game ourselves or buy a studio or anything like that. We just need to be able to pay for that exclusivity.
But the reason why I bring that up is if they're looking at new IP, I mean, are they just going to do another third-person action game?
Yeah,
as a new IP,
I don't think you would see another zombie game from them, right? So yeah, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, right. While they obviously play all very differently and they're very different tones, but essentially, your Last of Us, your God of War, your Days Gone, Ghost of Tsushima, I mean, they're all kind of third-person action games in just different types, even when you're bundling something like a Spider-Man. It just seems like that's what, when they're first party, when we talk about first party, that's their safe zone.
Yeah.
They don't really go outside of that, with the exception of Gran Turismo and stuff, but that's obviously well established. So,
if anything, I actually look them in a different way. I wonder if they'll push more into family-friendly games. And games not exactly but you look at games like Animal Crossing and Mario Kart, Nintendo right now just has a free run at that space of games. And, they're dominating Japan as well. And, the real kind of thrust of PlayStation now sits in the US, amazingly, but there's still a lot of important folk in Japan, and they'll be reeling from the fact that they're getting dominated by the Switch in Japan. So I do wonder, because the old PlayStation was always appealing across the whole gamut of ages. I feel like with the PlayStation 4, it got really mature, and I wonder if they'll start to push back into the kids' territory and things like that. But yeah, we'll see, Sweeney. It'll be interesting.